Hi folks, welcome back to VGC. It's Jordan here with some brand new gameplay footage of Doom, The Dark Ages Revelations. Now, every time a new Doom game is announced, I always, perhaps foolishly, think that there's nothing left to do with this franchise. That's not to say that I've not thoroughly enjoyed the post-2016 run of games, but one would think that there's only so many ways to rip and tear through the detritus of the underworld. And yet, with every new game or expansion, id Software surprises me with a new implement of chaos that makes me want to jump back in. Now, last week I got to see some of this footage from Doom The Dark Ages Revelations, which is a mouthful, so I'm just going to call it Revelations. And it's a new expansion that will be released next week. And id Software are saying it's the hardest content they have put in one of these Doom games, and I think it's interesting to think about it from the perspective of Doom Eternal. Now, when Doom The Dark Ages was released, a lot of players thought that Eternal was too focused on platforming, too focused on movement, and not enough on the shooting gameplay. So when The Dark Ages was originally revealed, they talked about how the Doomslayer was a tank rather than a fighter jet. And in this Revelations DLC, it seems like it's going back to that fighter jet approach. You now have a spear, which essentially functions as a grappling hook. You can also throw it, and you can plug it into enemies and strafe around them, but primarily it is a traversal mechanic that also happens to be a weapon. So in that context, it makes this footage you're seeing look a lot more like Eternal than it does the Dark Ages. The Dark Ages was always about being slow and methodical and about parries and things like that, and all that stuff is still there, but it's paired with a dash and obviously this spear, meaning that you are spending a lot of time up in the air. Now, the platforming focus from Eternal doesn't seem to be there, which is a good thing in my opinion, but I think it's an interesting change in mechanical perspective that I think will divide players who are going to play this expansion. Hugo Martin, the game's director, talked about it as basically the progression from Doom 2016 to Eternal. They're doing that again between Doom The Dark Ages and Revelations, and obviously if you know the lore of the post 2016 Doom games, it makes sense that the Doomslayer gets more agile and more able to do things like this as we get further along in the timeline, but I still think it makes the game look at least less like the Dark Ages. So the DLC, which they say is going to be about 12 hours long, twice the length of the Eternal DLC, is made up of a 60% base game, and then 40% of the DLC's content is apparently the endgame stuff. This is a chain of content that gets harder and harder. So essentially, when you complete the expansion, you can then do endgame missions, which have tougher enemies. And when you complete all of those, that unlocks the Uber boss, which is, as you might guess, an incredibly difficult boss. But once you do that, that is not the end of it. There is also the master arenas that you have to beat the boss to get access to. Completing all of those, which again, id said is the hardest stuff they've ever done. Completing those unlocks more stuff, although I think the stuff that unlocks is more cosmetic and abilities and things like that. That master arena seems to be the end of the content. Depending on your skill in the game, it can certainly be an incredibly long DLC. I'm certainly interested to play the DLC because I really liked that original game. I liked the pseudo open world approach, I liked the multiple different objectives, but I think this looks pretty different. I want to know in the comments what you think of this gameplay, and if you prefer the Eternal approach to the Dark Ages, or you're a Doom 2016 person, let me know in the comments and we'll let the rest of this gameplay play out. Thank you for watching. Remember, you can support VGC on Patreon at patreon.com/videogameschronicle.